Good evening and welcome to the ITV News in London. Tonight, as Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe prepares to hang up his hat as Met Commissioner, he'll be live with us in the studio. We'll talk failures, successes and successors, and we'll look at his legacy.
Keeping London safer isn't easy, and Bernard Hogan-Howe has worked his socks off over the last 6 years. I've enjoyed working with him.
Also tonight, the supermodel who quit, then tried to kill herself after being forced to lose weight. The shocking conditions facing families in Newham, claims they're being ripped off by their landlord.
And I am live at St Paul's Cathedral, where those famous bells face being silenced forever. Find out why.
It's been a busy 5 years for Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe. We had the Olympics, the attack on Lee Rigby, the investigation into a Westminster paedophile ring that didn't exist, plus a round of cuts to deal with. Soon he'll have a lot more time to reflect on it all when he retires as our city's police commissioner. So how does he judge his time in office? And what are his hopes and fears for the Met ahead? We'll ask him that and more in just a moment. But first is our senior correspondent, Ronke Phillips, with a look back.
I'm very pleased to announce that Bernard Hogan-Howe has been appointed as the next Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police.
Appointed in the wake of the hacking scandal, he was the clear winner for the top job. He'd driven down crime as Chief Constable of Merseyside and accepted the post with a no-nonsense promise to rule the Met with a rod of iron.
I'd like to go in and start work, but particularly to remember that the idea is to make the criminals fear the police and what they're doing now.
His record on crime has been mixed. It did fall, but recently violent crime has been creeping up again. Many, including some of his own officers, believe the increase in knife crime in particular can be linked directly to the reduction in stop and search, a policy backed by the Commissioner.
So yeah, definitely stronger sentences.
And families who've lost loved ones in stabbing incidents believe they've paid the price. Michelle Cartwright's son Alan was stabbed to death by a youth who at the time of the killing was on bail for possessing a knife.
They're not going to stop these people and search them. If they've got nothing to hide, then there's no reason for them to make a big thing out of it, you know.
Sir Bernard can boast that he kept London safe. After the Paris attacks, other cities cancelled their New Year's Eve celebrations, but London's went ahead. And other large-scale events like the Olympics passed off peacefully. There was the murder of Fusilier Lee Rigby, but cyber attacks have not succeeded and terrorist plots have been foiled. His record is blotted by what a report called poor judgment in the bungled VIP child sex abuse inquiry Operation Midland. Sir Bernard forced to apologise to the former Tory MP Harvey Proctor, who was falsely accused of rape and murder by a fantasist known as Nick.
I'm not a murderer. I'm not a paedophile or pederast. The paranoid police have pursued a homosexual witch hunt on this issue.
Crucially, he has managed to keep police numbers at 32,000 while presiding over £600 million of cuts. But the force continues to grapple with diversity and hasn't shaken off charges of racism and sexism. An employment tribunal awarded firearms officer Carol Howard damages and criticised the Commissioner for suggesting her claims of discrimination were isolated. Sir Bernard did have his contract extended for a year, but it was claimed he wanted longer and there were tensions with the new mayor. Not so, says Sadiq Khan.
Keeping London safer isn't easy, and Bernard Hogan-Howe has worked his socks off over the last 6 years. I've enjoyed working with him.
Sir Bernard has set the record as the longest serving commissioner in modern history. But if he does have a preferred candidate to take over his £275,000 a year job, he hasn't said so yet. Ronke Phillips, ITV News.
Well, let's talk to the man himself, Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe. We'll talk about your successor in just a moment, as Ronke just alluded to just then. But let's start. You have had almost 6 years in the role, longer than the previous two men who held the post. How do you think it's been?
I think we're doing a great job. There have been occasional things to apologise for, and I have apologised. I've taken that personally and, take that responsibility personally. But I'm proud of the fact that when I took over We'd had the riots, if you remember. We'd had 26 of the London boroughs were rioting. We stabilised London after that. We didn't have that again, and thank goodness we didn't. We had a Met that was in crisis. My predecessor had gone, and half the management board went as well. We had to get ready for the Olympics, and we did that in a matter of weeks. G4S didn't quite deliver. We did all that. And, of course, we saved £600 million, and I'm proud of the fact we're the only force in the country to maintain our police officer numbers. While they lost 20,000, we stuck at 32,000. And during most of the time, we managed to reduce crime by about a fifth.
Yeah, let's talk about those numbers, because for the majority of your tenure, you've managed to reduce those violent crime numbers. But in the past few months, those numbers have started to creep up again. What do you think has been going wrong?
Well, we've seen right across the country an increase in violent crime. Now, part of that is better recording by us, the police. The HMI looked at it and said we weren't recording things accurately. So part of it is down to that. But within that, the most worrying aspect is stabbing. People getting stabbed. And that's the thing we've got to do something about. For, nearly 4 years during my time, we got it down by around a third, but then it started to rise. The reasons, I don't think anybody's absolutely clear, but I'd offer two reasons. I think one is that, when I started, we created a gangs command of about 1,200 officers. We concentrate on the gangs, put them away, but of course they come out, and that causes some disruption.
Yeah, but the thing is that I think looking at recent stats, fewer than 5% of knife attacks and knife crime are actually down to gangs. It now seems to be spreading beyond what we thought was just exclusively amongst gang culture.
Well, that's my point, really, is that when we concentrate on the gangs and manage to get them locked up, it reduced their contribution to crime. But now we are seeing some impact. But then secondly, as was alluded to there, I thought it was the right thing to do to reduce the 1.3 million stop searches that were happening. I thought it was too many. So we reduced it by about 70%. For a long time, we arrested more people, and knife crime came down. So I think we showed we're arresting the right people, we find the right ones. But it got to a point where clearly there's a possibility we need to do more, and that's what we've done.
I mean, is it down to perhaps you being very politically correct when it comes to talking about stop and search? Because, of course, some people could argue that it was disproportionately targeting those from Black and African backgrounds. So as a result of being perhaps politically correct, does that mean you've cut down on stop and search, but now we've seen that perhaps our young people aren't that safe on the streets because more people are carrying knives?
No, I don't think... Anybody who knows me would know I'm not politically correct, OK? I'm not somebody who the first thing would think. I hope they think I'm a fair person. I hope somebody who thinks that I want to support minorities and make sure that we're a representative police force. We've made great strides. That report suggested we hadn't. Actually, our recruits now, 1 in 3 are from minorities. That's an incredible... There's no other organisation that can say they've achieved that. So the reason that we reduced stop search was twofold. 1.3 million stop searches is too many in a city of 8.8 million. We were only arresting people about 7% at the time, and it was entirely possible we could do it better, and we showed we could, and I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And it wasn't because somebody told me they thought we should do it. It wasn't only the stats. I have had, over the last few years, every 4 weeks, a town hall meeting in a different part of London, and lots of families came to see me, lots of black families, who were worried about the number of times their kids were getting stopped. They weren't criminals, and they never would be. So I'd have been ignorant and arrogant to not respond to that.
I mean, we spoke to a father earlier on in the week who had been to a teenage birthday party, and he had confiscated 3 knives. Yeah,
I saw that.
One of which was 1 foot long. I mean, we can see it now on the screen. It was just absolutely unbelievable. I mean, should parents feel like their kids are safe on the streets of London at the moment?
They are. I mean, the fact that we've had more knife crime doesn't make it an incredibly unsafe place. We have got more, and we've got to do something to start to reduce it. But we are doing a series of things. 1, we are doing more targeted stop search. 2, we're having a look whether we've got the right gang members on the matrix. And number 3 is, obviously, we've got to make sure that where people are supplying these knives, those are awful things. Why are they supplying them? And also, finally, I think through the schools, we've got to get a message over, which I'd like to emphasise here today, to our kids: don't carry knives. There is no excuse for carrying a knife. Some people start saying, it's to keep me safe. I'm worried that somebody else pulls a knife. Don't do it. Because what happens is they use it on you if you're not quick enough. So don't carry knives. So we've got to be consistent in that message.
OK, let's move on to talking about your officers. Because if we look at the stats in terms of sick days and also days off for stress, it's risen by about 50% in the past 5 years. Does that mean we're seeing fewer officers on our streets due to the fact that they're dealing with, mental health issues because of what, the sorts of situations they're having to deal with every day?
There's no doubt that over the last few years, obviously, there's more and more pressure come on the police, and as we've seen, we've had less resources generally. Even though we've kept 32,000 police officers, for about 2.5 years, we dropped to 30. So if you get more work, you've got less people, it can produce its own stresses. But I have to say, I put our sickness rates, perhaps even against yours here. Many other organisations have far higher sickness rates than my organisation. My people work 24-hour shifts, they face people with knives, they face quite a lot of abuse at times, and it's quite a stressful job. So I think our sickness records are remarkably low, although people often think that public servants are, they take 6 days when they're not sick. What I know is my people come to work when they are sick, and sometimes even when they're terminally ill.
I mean, let's then talk about who will be in charge of your people when you move on. I know you haven't yet, hinted as to who you might like to success you out of the 4 who are in the final stages of the race. Will you give me any hint at all as to who you might like to take over?
I'd like to reveal... No, I'm not going to reveal anything. No, I think it's entirely inappropriate. I wish whoever it is well, and I'm sure that they'll make the best choice of the best person. I wouldn't have appreciated anybody making comments who was doing the job before I got it.
And it'd be great for London to be seen as being an equal city by perhaps having, for the very first time, a woman in charge.
Well, you see, what I would say is take the best person. Don't worry about gender, don't worry about race, just take the best person. Because why wouldn't you do anything else? I've had while I've been here in the Met, half my management board have been women. Not because I picked women, because I wanted women, because they were the best person for the job, and there is no doubt for them or anybody else about that. I've got a member of my management board, assistant commissioner, who is from mixed race. She's a fantastic person. I didn't pick her because she's mixed race.
Unfortunately, the world doesn't always work that way when it comes to
That's entirely up to the world.
Absolutely.
I can only give my best advice. My best advice is always go for the best talent. Because why would you go for second best?
Absolutely.
Why spend 5 to 7 years being led by someone at the beginning you thought wasn't the best person in that competition? Always go for the best talent.
Absolutely. Well, Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us.
And thank you for the opportunity.
And enjoy retirement.
Thank you.
Well, what do you think the top priorities of London's next commissioner should be? Well, you can let us know by taking part in our Snap poll, where cutting crime, as you can see, cutting costs and making London safer are the top 3 so far. Search for ITV London to have your say. Now, a third cyclist has been killed on the streets of London in under a week. The man was in a collision involving a lorry in the Docklands in East London this afternoon. He died at the roadside. 2 female cyclists were killed in separate crashes on Monday. Next tonight, the shocking conditions facing families in temporary accommodation in Newham. They say they're being ripped off by a private landlord contracted by the council. Ria Chatterjee has more details.
So this is the wardrobe. Sorry, everything in there is just smelly. It got mold. I don't mind shifting it.
Hidden. Not that you need to move cupboards to find the mold. It's in plain view.
It's my baby's jacket. This is the mold. And this is the state.
Mabel says the damp is settling into her body too.
It's burning. It's constantly affecting my eyes, which means my eyes is constantly watering, and I'm coughing on top of it, and I got little children in the house, so I don't feel this house at the moment is adequate enough to for the health needs of me and my children. And it is tough when you have to come home and you have facing health issues due to the living condition. Sorry. And there's not much you can do about it, but I hope for the best.
Some of the tenants of Custom House in Newham are fighting back.
We are freezing cold, stressed, sleep deprived, ripped off and angry.
This video documents a range of claims that Tando Property Services simply isn't up to scratch. Newham Council owns the flats but contracts the management to Tando.
The rent goes up and down. We get Section 21s, you're getting evicted. This is a house, this is where we live.
In a statement, Tando has apologised to tenants and says they don't feel the video is a fair representation of their work in the area. They say, We've saved the council significant sums of money whilst enabling local families in need of housing to remain in the borough rather than be housed elsewhere.
The council just needs to take back control. That's what I would say. The council needs to take. It's about time. We don't have to lose our children before they realise that there's something going on.
Newham Council says it takes residents' complaints very seriously and urges people to contact them if they feel Tando aren't helping. Ria Chatterjee, ITV News.
We are watching the ITV News in London, still to come. The bizarre Italian reality TV show about an East London football club. And as we whinge about the weather, Martin will tell us what date is historically the coldest of the year. But first, my next guest was a supermodel who walked at some of the biggest fashion shows in the world. Victoire d'Auxerre graced the catwalks in London, Milan and New York. But behind the glamour, she faced personal turmoil. She was urged to lose weight and at 5'10" was targeting an unhealthy 7 stone. She became ill, quit modelling and ended up attempting suicide. Well, I'm delighted to say that she's now recovered and she joins me now in the studio. Victoire, thank you so much for coming in. I mean, this book is searingly honest about exactly what it is that you went through. It's not often that models are so honest. What prompted you to tell your story?
Well, I think I experienced mistreatment, really, and so I wanted to denounce it. You know, I wanted to speak up about it because I think that fashion doesn't give a good image of women today, and that we have to talk about it because we don't want to be represented that way anymore. I wanted to talk about models who live it, but I wanted to talk about all the young girls and teenagers who actually identify themselves to this idea.
I mean, what's just absolutely fascinating is that you were told to drop from a size 8 to a size 4 as soon as you signed to the modelling agency, aged just 17. Did you feel as though you had no choice but to do that?
Oh, I had no choice at all, yeah. Okay. Basically, because they tell you have to fit into size 2 or 4 if you want to just fit into the clothes and go to the fashion world and go on the catwalk, and then you are literally applauded when you lose weight, you know. So, and I was literally actually chosen for all the fashion shows because I was so skinny.
Well, let's take a look at some of the pictures of you when you were at your smallest. I mean, what is it like to see pictures of yourself like that?
Well, it just makes me sad, you know, because of course I was really unhealthy. I was not eating anything. I thought I was like going to die because I fainted all the time. I was losing my hair. I had a skeleton of a 70-year-old woman, whereas I was only 18. So it's really unhealthy and it kills girls. You know, I was anorexic, and it's not a funny, superficial disease. We have to take it seriously.
And do you think this sort of environment still exists when it comes to the modelling industry?
Oh, of course. I mean, all the girls suffer from that, you know, from eating disorders. I can't say anorexia because it's a disease, you know, but eating disorders for sure, because you can't be healthy when you're 5'10" and you have to wear a size 2. It's not possible.
OK. Well, Victoire, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story and for writing about it so other people can learn about it too.
Yeah,
thank you. Well, if you've been affected by any of the issues that Victoire and I have been talking about, then you'll find more information about who you can contact on our website. Just search for ITV London. Last night's Brexit vote may have been comfortable for the government, but the recriminations within Labour in London go on. 22 of the party's MPs in the capital defied their leader, Jeremy Corbyn, to vote against triggering Article 50. One of them, David Lammy, said the leadership managed the vote badly.
I don't think this should have been a 3-line whip. I think it should have been a vote of conscience. I still think that by and large members of Parliament would have voted for it and it would have gone through. But here in London, where business and economy will suffer, where people will suffer when there's an economic downturn in deprived communities like the one I represent, it's absolutely clear that the vast majority of members of Parliament want to stand with their constituents.
And unsurprisingly, Brexit is the hot topic on tonight's Late Debates with Simon Harris. Let's join him at his studio in Westminster. Simon, how much long-term damage is this likely to cause for Labour in London?
Charlene, it's one of the unwritten rules of politics. It's the Tory party which is always at war with itself over Europe. But after last night's Brexit vote, it's Labour that's in turmoil. Almost half of Jeremy Corbyn's fellow London MPs defied his three-line whip. He insisted today he's going nowhere. I'm not standing down, he said. Well, Shadow Minister Catherine West, the MP for Hornsey and Wood Green, is one of those Labour rebels.
I think last night was probably one of the saddest nights in politics for me.
Sad?
Because I've always been a really strong believer in the European Union, and there was something final about the third reading on that bill. So I actually went home feeling angry and sad, mixed emotions, but certainly I've got a clear conscience.
Also tonight, the senior Tory from Surrey who astonished MPs when he admitted to using poppers. Crispin Blunt is chairman of the important Foreign Affairs Committee. I'll be asking him for his verdict on Britain's diplomat-in-chief, Boris Johnson. That's the late debate here on ITV at 11:15. Charlene.
Thanks very much, Simon. Next night, they've been the soundtrack of some of this country's most momentous moments. The bells at St Paul's toll for royal weddings. At the Diamond Jubilee. And at funerals like Margaret Thatcher's. But those bells need urgent repairs or they'll fall silent. Church leaders have launched an appeal to raise £360,000. Lucrezia Millerini is at St Paul's for us tonight. Lucrezia.
Yes, Charlene. For tourists and Londoners alike, St Paul's Cathedral here, still one of the most iconic landmarks here in the capital. Also, those bells, those famous bells that have been ringing here for more than 140 years, silenced only during wartime, but now, as you say, face being quietened forever, and that's because they are in need of urgent repair. Well, joining me now to talk a bit more about the campaign to raise the funds to get them repaired is the Reverend Canon Michael Hamble. You're the presenter here, and I believe that means you're responsible for worship and music, and of course, the bells.
The bells, indeed I am, yes. 12 bells, 12 of the finest bells in the country, but we need to do some work to get them exactly where they need to be to carry on doing the great work that they do here.
Now, a lot of people won't realise this, but there are two sets of bells here at St Paul's Cathedral. Which ones are we talking about?
On the left, as we look at the front of the building, in the North Tower, we have the 12 bells that ring for services and special events. On the right, as you look at the building, there are the clock bells. The clock bells are fine. It's the service bells that we need to look at.
Yeah, so people at home, they'll be looking now, it's to the left of their TV screens, that tower. You talk about these special events, there've been many over the years, haven't they? And one that a lot of people will remember, of course, is Charles and Diana's wedding back in 1981.
That's right, a little bit before my time, but yes, definitely 1981, those bells ringing, making a great statement of celebration and joy, ringing across London and saying something very special is happening here.
Yeah, the problem is they are very old, they are very heavy, each weighs about 3 tonnes. How much money do you need to fix them all?
We need £360,000, which is nicely divisible by 12, so we're saying £30,000 a bell. They need a good clean, they need their fastenings sorted. They're perfectly safe right now.
Yep.
We want to do the work before they become unsafe, which will happen in X number of years' time.
Okay, well listen, thank you very much for talking to me this evening. Well, hopefully that work will get done and they will be ringing for many years to come.
All right, Lee, thanks very much. Well, as you notice, it's pretty cold where Lucrezia is, and Martin's here to talk about that. Is it any colder than normal?
Well, yes, but not historically speaking. Let's go all the way back to 1683. The Thames froze then. It was one of 5 frost fairs they had between 1683 and 1884. More recently, well, the 1st of February 1956, -10 was the warmest it got. Compare that to the 13th of February 1998. London was basking in 19.7 degrees. February is the coldest month always. We think the coldest day is normally about the 17th of February, though that is up for some debate. So we're not quite there yet. There is, though, a hint that things are getting not warmer, but certainly less cold for the beginning of next week, which will be welcome because it's freezing out there. So, as discussed, it's been very cold out there today. And, well, that's how it's staying as we head through the weekend, largely to do with that bitingly bitter easterly wind we've got, and so cold, in fact, that most showers will have a hint of some snow or sleet in them, though it is very unlikely to settle in any widespread form. What exactly is going on? We'll take a look at the freezing temperatures in Warsaw and in Moscow. That is where the air is coming from. The cold air crossing the North Sea heading towards us, and as it picks up the moisture over the sea, that then falls as showers over Essex and Kent. And you'll see we're holding on to very cold temperatures through the weekend. They don't really start to pick up again until we get to Monday. Out there tonight, well, a pretty similar picture to last night, really. 1 or 2 light showers, a bit of sleet and snow, possibly a dusting in some more rural spots over higher ground. For all of us, well, it is going to be cold, temperatures getting down near to freezing and quite windy too. So a very chilly and slightly dull start to tomorrow. Tomorrow really is going to be a carbon copy of what we've seen today. So again, some light sleety showers here and there, not too much of a sign of any sunshine under some grey skies. And very disappointing temperatures indeed. 3 degrees in the city centre, but that doesn't take into account that wind chill factor, that biting wind coming in from the east, meaning it's going to feel more like freezing or even below that for most of us. And then as we head towards the weekend, well, it stays very cold once more, particularly on Saturday. Any showers again having a slightly wintry element. We do then see temperatures ever so slightly picking up as we head into Monday. Then we're getting back up to what we'd expect at this time of year. Goodbye.
Finally tonight, Leyton Orient have one of the richest traditions in English football. They've been in the Football League for over a century and sent more players to fight in the First World War than any other club. But in recent years, they've become something of a laughingstock. They've got through 9 managers in 2.5 years and are now facing relegation from the Football League. That and some bizarre appearances on Italian television has left fans wanting the owners out. Our sports reporter Amy Lewis went to find out what's been going wrong.
This is how Leyton Orient's Italian owner wants his home country to see his football club. Francesco Becchetti commissioned a reality television show offering viewers the opportunity to win a player's contract. But it's not all glamour at the club, which is facing the realistic prospect of becoming a non-league club for the first time in a century. The new manager admits it's going to be a massive challenge to avoid relegation.
It's been a steady decline for the whole season. Over the last few years, the team and the results has gradually gone on a downhill slope.
Is there a real concern that you could be relegated out of the Football League?
Yes, definitely. If the season finished tomorrow, we'd be going down. So that's how we've got to look at it. Big clubs and, arguably bigger clubs than us have got relegated.
Orient, which is the second oldest Football League club in the capital after Fulham, has a proud history. During the First World War, 41 members of the team and staff joined the 1st Footballers' Battalion, more than any club in the country. Orient's golden years were in the 60s and 70s. In 62, they even managed to reach the top tier of English football. But in 2014, supporter and local businessman Barry Hearn sold the club to Becchetti, which coincided with the club's drop down the leagues. Since Becchetti bought the club 2.5 years ago, he has hired and fired 9 managers. He now barely comes to matches and the supporters want him to sell up. Leyton Orient Fans Trust has organised protests and demanded change.
It's falling apart, fans are fighting amongst themselves. We're trying the best we can at the Fans Trust, but what we need to happen is this owner needs to sell quickly and we need to get on with preparing a new history for Leyton Orient.
Most people have personal and emotional investment in this club. I have a relative who's actually is a pitch side. The thought of the club diminishing before our eyes when there is that kind of level of personal attachment to it is heartbreaking.
The players have 70 matches to save their place in the Football League. The next reality TV show might not attract so many viewers if they're in the non-leagues. Amy Lewis, ITV News.
Now, just before we go, we've all heard mind the gap and stand clear of the closing doors. Have you ever heard a tube announcer quite as entertaining as this?
Nice stop, driver. Respect. Rubber dog style.
Well, it's enough to put a smile on anyone's face, isn't it? This announcer has been making the daily commutes that little bit more bearable for passengers at Victoria. So is he London's most entertaining announcer? If you've seen and heard better, then do get in touch on Facebook. Just search for ITV London. Well, that's it from us for now. We're back with the latest after ITV News at 10. Coming up, Mary Nightingale with the ITV Evening News. But for me and the rest of the London team, goodbye.